While global attention has been focused on the first skirmishes in a U.S.-Sino trade war, Chinese authorities have been preparing to confront economic change with a far greater threat to world growth. Last week, the South China Morning Post reported that China's Ministry of Finance, under newly appointed Minister Lu Kun, had told state-owned financial institutions in explicit language not to provide any funding to local governments, with the exception of buying government bonds. These are the entities that have primarily been responsible for building thousands of kilometers of freeways, bridges, complex spaghetti junctions and other heavy infrastructure that all use millions of tons of rebar, steel reinforcement bar, in construction. Perhaps it's because they backtracked so fast from pledges to end the economy's debt reliance when global markets nosedived in early in 2016 that global investors yawned at the news. Peking University professor of finance Michael Pettis voiced some of the market doubts and explained the risks. While I am pretty sure that the leadership recognizes that this will put downward pressure on GDP growth, I don't think they fully recognize just how much downward pressure, he said. Any policy that keeps the growth in debt servicing costs roughly in line with the growth in debt servicing capacity must drive growth rates down sharply, probably to below, even well below, 3 to 4%. And I wonder if Beijing has the appetite for this kind of slowdown. Nevertheless, all the latest statements and political moves indicate Chinese authorities are again preparing to seriously tackle its mounting debt problem. Unless another sizable global economic bloc was somehow able to take over the debt money baton while China deleveraged, the global system will face serious growth and financial system risks as borrowers struggle to find sufficient cash flow to repay debts. Among the first steps was the consolidation of power by President Xi Jinping in October, giving him at least another 5 years to carry out what has become an exceptionally difficult task since they balked from taking the restructuring medicine in 2016. Since then, China's total debt has risen by another $3 trillion. That means the need for action has become urgent or a full-blown financial crisis could unfold. Standard Bank China economist Jeremy Stevens noted that China's new Vice Premier Liu He, a close ally of Mr. Xi, told the World Economic Forum in January that the Chinese government would bring debt under control within 3 years. Furthermore, Mr. Liu stated that some reforms would exceed the expectations of the international community. That makes this week's announcement on the local government debt shutout all the more ominous. The reason it's a serious problem for the world, and Australia in particular, is that the global financial system requires a steady increase in money flow so that borrowers can somehow meet their interest burdens, especially with US dollar borrowing costs rising. But China has been the primary source of global money flow with $30 trillion of debt money creation since 2009. As credit money expert Professor Steve Keen has noted, even a slowdown in the positive rate of change of credit, let alone an actual decline, can result in a serious buildup in financial risks. So unless another sizable global economic bloc was able to take over the debt money baton while China deleveraged, the global system will face serious growth and financial system risks as borrowers struggle to find sufficient cash flow to repay debts. If not, they will default, destroying money in the process and compounding the slowdown from China. While the doubts about the commitment to deleverage linger, since at least 2015 Chinese financial authorities have made it quite clear they understood the risks from the economy's debt dependency, and they now finally appear to be conveying the urgency to act. Mr. Stevens said after bringing China's banks, some of the biggest in the world, and powerful insurers, to heel, China seemed to have graduated to the second stage of the deleveraging process. The party could not be clearer about its policy focus for this year, he said. These policies were, 1. Necessity, the shift to higher quality economic growth, 1 main task, the supply-side structural reform, and 3 battles, which were dealing with risks in the financial system, alleviating poverty and countering environmental pollution. The Chinese government has now taken the emphasis off debt-fueled growth, he said. The regulators have made good on that project, as total bank assets growth continues to hit all-time lows, slipping from 8.7% year-on-year in January to 8% in February. That deceleration has already been reflected in the 18% fall in the iron ore price since February, and the 10% fall in industrial bellwether metal copper this year. Further afield, the cost premium to borrow US dollars in the global interbank market has soared to 58 points over the cost for US interbank borrowers at 1.75%, indicating that the global supply of money was becoming increasingly constrained as China tightened. China has defied debt growth skeptics for some years now, stomping on the growth accelerator each time the economy slowed, but now their financial credibility is at stake. They made such a big deal about getting debt under control last year, and have so heavily signaled their intentions, that to a certain extent their credibility is tied up in sharply reducing credit growth to a sustainable level. Mr. Pettis said, underscoring risks that this time they really do mean it. Xinjiang province, an area bigger than France, Germany and Spain combined, issued a blanket suspension of government-sponsored investment projects in the first response to official orders.